welcome to those who've already joined us. I'm just going to get a few moments to let others in and then we'll make a start. Okay, so things have slowed a little bit. I'm sure we'll have others joining us throughout the next few minutes. But welcome to everyone who's joined us already for this webinar to celebrate International Women's Day. And we've got some great speakers for you today, who I know you'll enjoy hearing from. I don't know about you, but I feel like it's been quite a tough week for women, all in all. I certainly started off the week feeling very positive and optimistic, and then various things that have happened through the week have led me to feel sad, angry, despairing at various points. And obviously we are all devastated by the recent news of what has probably happened to Sarah Everard. But as women, we know that we need to continue to fight for things that are right and to ensure that we have equality in all things, not least in work. So let's have a positive hour, I hope, and I look forward to hearing any questions you may have, either about what we talk about today or anything that impacts women at work, I guess. I'm really happy to have with us. I mean, we've through the pandemic, I think what has been really inspiring for me is the amount of women across the industries who have stepped up, collaborated together to lobby on behalf of members, and really worked very proactively to try to make a difference. And I could name so many women, but just to name a few, certainly politicians, people like Tracy Brabin, Joe Stevens, others across, Caroline Lucas, many who have been involved in lobbying around the excluded. In the industry itself, people like Alex from the Film and TV charity, Caroline Norbury from the Creative Industries Federation, and many more organisations like Share My Telly Job, Telly Mums, Parents and Carers in Performing Arts, Raising Films. I could go on and on and on. And that's really been inspiring for me, and I'm sure for many others who work in the industry, to see women stepping up and doing the right thing on behalf of members and the people that they represent. So I'm really pleased to have with us today Sonali Joshi, who is one of the founding members of Excluded UK, who will be speaking to us first about the work that she's been doing through the pandemic. Secondly, Olga Fitzroy, who works with Pregnant and Screwed on the issue of self-employment, but is also a sound engineer. And last but by no means least, our very own Liz Hardwick, who is a member of the Bectu Sector Executive Committee, but also chairs our Women's Equality Committee. And she'll be talking about the work that that committee have been doing throughout the year, and actually throughout every year. So thanks and welcome to you all. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Sonali to you and ask her to talk for a little while. And as I say, and I think that it's in the chat, if you've got any questions or points that you want to raise, please put them in the Q&A. Sonali, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Philippa, and thanks for inviting me along to be part of this panel today. I'm a director of a small limited company working in the film industry. I work across film exhibition, film distribution, and access services for film and the arts more broadly. So that's subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing and translation, audio description for the blind and visually impaired. All of my work is really centered on the principles of accessibility, inclusion, and diversity. Alongside that, I'm also a freelance writer, and I do other bits of freelance work, and I work with a team of around 200 freelancers. So very early on in the pandemic, my work was affected by both ends of the film industry needing films to be made to have work and needing cinemas to be open in order to show work. And I was at the time working on a very ambitious curatorial project that I was planning to launch in June of last year. It was intended to be a 3-year project. I had to take a very early decision to pause those activities, not being in a position to actually further the planning of them several months ahead at that point. And I launched into lobbying vigorously for the creative industries, essentially for my own industry and the creative industries more broadly at that point. And those activities brought me together with 2 other small business owners, actually not within the creative industries. The 3 of us are from different sectors, different parts of the country, and Excluded UK was born. We are a volunteer-run grassroots, not-for-profit organisation. We established in May, a few weeks after the pandemic set in. And we set up in response to the financial challenges faced by individuals and businesses entirely or largely excluded from government COVID-19 support. I did have some previous campaigning experience, working quite a lot with documentary in the past. Documentary has always lent itself well to campaigning. And so it was a very natural reaction for me to sort of transpose this previous experience into Excluded UK, but alongside the many other amazing individuals who came together to form our fantastic team, which is approximately 30 volunteers. And the majority of them are women, by quite a margin, in fact. So I would say that our work is in many ways very much female-driven activism, as it were. In terms of a kind of creative slant to what we do, I mean, we estimate that around 30% of those among our members, which is 30,000 in our Facebook group, 30,000+ on Twitter, and the reach that we have beyond that, around 30% are from the creative industries. So a lot of our activity is embedded in creative activity, as it were, producing visual content. For example, we projected an animation onto the House of Parliament on the day of activities, which involved the Panto Parade led by Bectu back in September last year. We've just released a series of videos tying in with International Women's Day, where we invited formidable women within our community to say what they choose to challenge, keeping in with the theme of International Women's Day this year. We also have a virtual choir that was set up by a screenwriter in London and a music teacher in Glasgow, both women. And we also work alongside many other organisations within the creative industries and beyond as well. Our key activity more recently has been focused around a proposal that we put forward to the Treasury, partly alongside Pregnant Then Screwed. We work very closely with them, and Beth Power, who is part of our Exclusion UK team and also has been campaigning so strongly around maternity rights, and the Gaps in Support APPG, which we initially set up back in July of last year. And this is all very much focused around pregnant women and new parents. We're still to hear further on that, and we have put a lot of energy into that, and we really do hope that the Treasury will take note of some of the serious inequalities that we've brought to light. But more broadly speaking, the advocating work, the lobbying that we've been doing over the last year has been focused around the fact that the furlough scheme and the self-employment income support schemes, they fell far short of providing adequate financial support for what we estimated initially to be 3 million UK taxpayers. We now think that the number is probably a little bit more than that. In fact, Standard Life Foundation, in their most recent report of end of January, estimated 3.8 million. And from the data that we've collected, the numbers are definitely skewed towards women. Our latest survey came up with a figure of 56% of women being affected, but it could well be more than that, because there is no doubt from all the anecdotal observations that we can make and all the other data that we've gathered over the last year that women have most definitely been disproportionately affected. Amongst that and alongside that are people who have been shielding, the disabled, younger workers, older workers, and as I mentioned, pregnant women, new parents. But women more broadly, we know, have been very much disproportionately affected by these exclusions. And one of the reasons for that is no doubt the fact that some of the hardest hit sectors are sectors that have a higher proportion of women working in those sectors. For example, beauty and hairdressing, weddings, the wedding industry, childcare, among others. And according to ONS, most self-employed women work in the sectors of health and social work, creative and media industries, hairdressing, teaching, among others. So we know that these are amongst the hardest hit sectors. I mean, more broadly speaking, within the creative industries, we know that many people who are working as freelancers on 0-hour contracts, small limited companies, sole traders, the self-employed more broadly, work in a mode of precarity to start with anyway. And what the pandemic has done and what this crisis has done by being excluded has exacerbated that precarious nature of the way in which we work, and more importantly, the working conditions around the ways in which we work as freelancers, the self-employed, small limited company, but also others as well who've been affected across all employment statuses. So this has just simply placed us in a much more pronounced state of precarity, with industries that are in peril, and that has been highlighted so strongly over the last year. The impacts that we've seen are that people have been facing increasing financial hardship, spiraling debt, and this is something that we feel is really significant and very far-reaching, that the personal debt that people are facing could be hanging over people for years to come. And this has all manner of further impacts. There are knock-on effects on families, households, children, education, and for small business owners, their employees, their freelancers, their subcontractors, who will inevitably be without work if their businesses are on the brink to start with. There's a growing mental health crisis that is very much evident from the many testimonies that we read from individuals literally every single day. People have been relying on savings and pensions, and that's been decimating people's future financial security as well. Food banks has become a reality for many people. Some people have been losing their homes or forced into other living arrangements that would never been part of the picture for them. People have been forced to sell belongings. And another harsh statistic that we found in our latest survey is that 41% of respondents are now placed within that category of being within relative poverty. Now that is quite staggering. 41% of the number of respondents was over 5,500 of people who have been excluded. And what we know is that these are people who have largely been self-sufficient up until this point, people who've never had to rely on welfare before. And that's another stark factor within this, that many people actually haven't been able to access welfare either, for a number of reasons. Another really significant impact is that people's careers are being destroyed. And I think for the creative industries, that's really significant, because what we could be facing is a skills gap in the future. People are being forced out of their sectors, being forced from skilled work to unskilled work in many cases. People's businesses have failed or are failing, or have huge debt hanging over them. Younger workers have been left without opportunities in their chosen careers, or are struggling to get a foothold on the career ladder. Older workers have been disadvantaged by not being in a position to retrain, or simply disadvantaged through age. So the impacts of being excluded alone are very far-reaching, but certainly that being skewed towards women, and the fact that women face so much inequality in many respects already, only places women in a further state of precarity. So, I mean, what I would say in conclusion is simply the fact that the pandemic, the crisis, has really highlighted some of the stark inequalities that exist in our industries that have been very much amongst the hardest hit. And those inequalities also extend to freelancers more broadly. around working conditions and what it truly means to be a freelancer, to be self-employed, to be a small limited company, to be a 0-hour contract worker. These are things that we feel government have really failed to understand. And that is what we will be taking forwards in our campaigning going on from here. Thank you.
Sonali, thank you for that very passionate explanation of what you've been up to and how Excluded UK came about over about a year ago, I guess, isn't it? Bectu has also been doing some surveying of members about the impact of the pandemic on, you know, all of our industries and the more importantly, the people who work in them, of course. And I think some of those statistics that come out of that are going to be quite stark. But I just want to pay tribute to you and all of your colleagues for the amazing way that you sort of came together, made Excluded UK a reality. And I know you've had all of you have had very difficult times personally, but I mean, the campaigns that you've run, the publicity that you've been able to bring to the campaign has been just so inspiring. And I know that you don't intend to go away anytime soon, and that lots of the support mechanisms that you've provided for your members will continue into the future. So thank you, Sonali. I'm sure people have questions for you later, but I think we'll leave that to the end if that's okay. And now can I welcome Olga? I don't think I said at the beginning, actually. I should have said that everyone who's involved in the webinar today all work in the creative industries in some way or another. So it's really good to not only hear their perspectives about, you know, the impact of things on women more generally, but also to have a very, very sector specific view of all of that. So Olga, you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really nice to be here. As a sound engineer, it's nice to be amongst colleagues as well. And it's nice to see Philippa on a call that is not just doom and gloom and kind of being talked at by the government, which we've been on a few of those. So yeah, in my day job, I'm a sound engineer, and in my spare time, I consult for the charity Pregnant and Screwed on a lot of the self-employed issues that mums face. I'm going to start off and tell you a little bit about the charity Pregnant and Screwed. And what we do in normal times, and then I'm going to come on to COVID and the impact, and then specifically onto self-employed women. So Pregnant and Screwed was founded by Jolie Brearley in 2015 after she was fired from her job for being pregnant. She was 4 months pregnant and was told she had a high-risk pregnancy, so even if she could have afforded the extortionate legal fees to bring a tribunal, the 3-month time limit meant that it just wasn't an option for her to pursue it while she was pregnant because of the risk. And after that, any opportunity of seeking justice would have gone. So instead of getting angry, she got even. She set up a website which started off just women sharing their stories of pregnancy discrimination, and then quickly grew when it became clear that there's a need for further support. So there's now a legal helpline. There is employment tribunal peer mentoring. So obviously in an ideal world, we'd provide legal support for everybody that needed it, but obviously as a small charity, that's just not affordable. But what we have got is a bunch of really passionate women who have been through the tribunal process, who want to support other women through it. And so if you need a mentor, there's a form on the website, you can fill it in, and you will be paired with someone who has been through the process, and just be somebody on your team that can support you and guide you through what is often a really stressful time. As well as that, we also do workplace training for employers, because not all employers are bad, and some might not be doing best practice, but they're really willing to learn. So there is a service where we offer all sorts of everything from unconscious bias to supporting returners, and everything on and flexible working, basically how to become the best workplace for pregnant women and new mums. And the final bit of work, which I guess I've been most involved in, is the lobbying politicians to create change. So in normal times, some of our core asks are the Give Me 6 campaign, which is to extend the tribunal time limits from 3 months to 6 months as a bare minimum. I mean, ideally, we would like it longer. We would like well-paid parental leave for both partners, selfie leave, which is a campaign that I started a few years ago to give shared parental leave to self-employed people. Affordable childcare to enable parents to get back into the workplace if they choose to do so. And also a system for recording and monitoring NDAs that are routinely used to gag women who've been discriminated against, and also in other legal issues such as sexual harassment. And finally, the other thing we've been campaigning on is flexible working, and we're hoping that there's going to be a bit of good news on that soon. We had some indications from Liz Truss, the Equalities Minister, that the government is willing to improve the current laws, which is basically, at the moment, you have a right to ask for flexible working, but only if you've been with a company for a year. So we really hope that the government is going to take that forward and improve on it and make it usable for people. So the reason that we do all these campaigns, there's some really shocking stats that I keep having to look up just to remind myself why we do what we do. The first one is the motherhood penalty, which is the financial differential between what a mother gets paid to what a man gets paid, and that is currently 33%. So by the time a mother's first child is 12, she'll be getting 33% less than a man. And we also estimate that 80% of the gender pay gap that we've heard a lot about this week is actually down to motherhood and how it is treated by employers and clients. So that's what we do in normal times, and that's the why. I'm going to come on to COVID now, which has been devastating for mothers for all sorts of reasons. Now, we appreciate, obviously, it's an unprecedented crisis. We keep hearing this, and lots of decisions were made quickly. But every time a decision was made, we kept having to bang on the door going, what about mothers? What about women? What about pregnant women? It just never, ever seemed to be, not even at the forefront, it was just never considered. So the two sort of main areas that we've been campaigning on have been on health and safety, obviously, in a pandemic, and also the economic impacts. So first of all, on the health and safety issue, one of the big things that has happened in the pandemic is that women have been forced to give birth on their own. And in November, there's one woman who was pregnant with triplets and had lost 2 of them and was not allowed to take her partner in for a scan to check whether the third one was still okay. The way that both the government and people high up in hospital trusts didn't prioritise the well-being of pregnant women was just shocking. So in November, we wrote to Sir Simon Stevens, who's the head of the NHS, together with 60 MPs, clinicians and heads of charities, asking trusts to review their guidance on visiting restrictions. Now, obviously, it was a pandemic. We realised that hospitals have to make clinical decisions, but the fact was that it was just a blanket ban on visitors, which was having a huge impact on women. We surveyed 15,000 pregnant women and new mums, and we found that 90% of pregnant women said hospital restrictions had a negative impact on their mental health. 97% said the restrictions increased their anxiety around childbirth. And what is really quite disturbing is that almost 18% felt forced to have a vaginal examination in order to have their partner attend birth, which is really shocking. Thankfully, the government listened, and in December, the guidance to trusts changed, saying that women should be allowed a partner in all stages of their maternity journey, provided their partner had no COVID symptoms, and it required trusts to review their rules on visitors. Again, obviously, as the pandemic changed, it wasn't consistent across trusts, and the situation in different hospitals was quite acute at different points, but it did make a difference, and we had a lot of hospitals that did change their restrictions following that letter and following a lot of campaigning also by the Conservative MP Alicia Cairns. The other part of health and safety is obviously workplace health and safety. On 16th of March, so almost a year ago, pregnant women were classed as vulnerable. But the guidance for employers and employees has left a lot to be desired. It was unclear, it was difficult to find, and it took until December 2020 for the government to publish specific guidance for employers relating to pregnant women. Almost a year. some of the really devastating effects of not having this clear guidance was that a lot of workers, and particularly those from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, felt less safe at work and were more likely to be suspended on incorrect terms. Now, to support that, while there was no proper government guidance available, or it was kind of hidden through lots of links on websites, it was impossible to find. We provided pro forma letters for people to write to their employers, requesting risk assessments and suspensions on full pay if employees couldn't work safely. And it's also worth remembering for freelancers that they can also access the risk assessments at their place of work, because if your workplace has more than 5 employees, the employer is legally required to publish it. So even if you're not an employee, you have a legal right to look at that risk assessment. And finally, I'm also going to go into the economic impact of COVID on pregnant mums and women. So we found obviously a huge part of that is the sudden need for childcare to be taken up by families, and that's disproportionately fallen on women. 81% said they needed childcare in order to work, and 51% said they didn't have the necessary childcare in place to enable them to work. 46% of employees that we surveyed said that said a lack of childcare provision was part of their redundancy, part of the reason for their redundancy. 44% of self-employed mums were forced to give up childcare places during COVID because they couldn't afford to pay for it, which in turn had the effect that now 1 in 4 early years providers are at risk, according to an IFS report. And I imagine that number has probably increased as the pandemic's gone on. We also found that 74% of self-employed mothers felt the lack of access to childcare reduced their self-employed earning potential, unsurprisingly. And then the final bit of icing on the cake for the self-employed mums was that we believe that about 70,000 self-employed mothers had their SEISS, their SACE payments, reduced because they'd taken maternity leave in the past 3 years. This is something that the minute the criteria for the SACE were published, I knew it would be a problem for mothers. Because I think if anyone self-employed has ever tried to apply for a mortgage, you face the same issue. If you have a gap in your earning, your average income gets assessed as far lower than your actual income when you're working. Now, we raised this with select committees. It's appeared in various select committee reports. We've written to MPs, we wrote to the Treasury, and we've not ever had a sensible answer. After Ellie Reeves MP raised it in the House of Commons, the Chancellor said it was a fair system and compared being on maternity leave to being on holiday. Now, anyone that's been on maternity leave knows that it's nothing like a holiday. So after we'd raised this lots of times and got nowhere, we decided we had no option but to take legal action. With a lot of support from a number of trade unions, including Bectu and the rest of the entertainment unions, we were able to bring a legal case for judicial review in the High Court against the government. Now, unfortunately, the judge found against us, but we've gone back and spoken to our legal team, and they agree with us that they think the judgment is fundamentally flawed and believe that we do have grounds for appeal. So right now we're actually in the process of raising the funds for a legal appeal. I think our crowdfunder has nearly met its target. And again, Bectu have been amazingly supportive on this. So we're really hopeful that we can bring an appeal. I know, like Philip has already said, it's been a really awful week for women, but I'd like to end on a positive. I think if we get this appeal, we do have a good chance of getting justice for the 70,000 women who have been shortchanged and left in financial difficulties due to the Chancellor's discrimination. So I think if we get the appeal, we have a chance of winning. The other positive is, as I mentioned earlier, Liz Truss, the Equalities Minister, did say that she wanted to make flexible working the norm. And again, there should be an employment bill coming after the Queen's speech that we hope the government will bring those things into. And I have to say, I agree completely with Sonali as well on all the other improvements that really need to be made to precarious workers' rights. We found that so much in this pandemic. you know, I'm not holding out a lot of hope that they're going to get everything that we want, but I think it is an opportunity for a lot of trade unions and groups like Excluded to try and get something for the self-employed when there's an employment bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olga. I was going to give you the opportunity, actually. I don't know if you want to do this, add the link in the chat or something. I was going to give you the opportunity to plug Jolie's book if you wanted to do that.
Yes.
I know that.
I think I can probably send a link round in a minute to Naomi, who can put it in the chat. But yeah, Jolie, our founder, has written a book that came out last week that details the history of Pregnant Then Screwed, and has also got an awful lot of stats and information about all the issues that we've discussed, and it's actually quite an entertaining read as well. If anyone's ever met Jolie or seen her in an interview, it is definitely her that's written it. You know, you can hear her voice even though it's quite serious issues. So if you get a chance, I do recommend take a look at it.
Thanks, Olga. And I think you make, I mean, all of these contributions will make the point that I'm sure that if in government we had more women who had experience of, you know, either being self-employed or being, you know, a mother, or, you know, facing challenges whilst at work because they are a woman for whatever reason, then I'm sure that the world would be a better place. And likewise, you know, for trade unions, it's really important that women have a strong voice, and that the issues which really matter to women are being addressed in workplaces, whether people are freelancers or employed. And so that it's certainly something I'm very passionate about, and I know Liz is too. And Liz, as I said earlier, chairs our Women's Equality Committee, which seeks to make the workplace better for women. So I'm just going to hand over to Liz now to talk about the work that committee has been undertaking, and perhaps some of the things that we might want to do in the future as well. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Philippa. And yeah, thank you very much to Sonali and Olga for sharing their experiences and stories of their campaigns, because I am self-employed myself. I work and run a media and digital training company, and yeah, I am self-employed, and I have felt it during lockdown. And you know, I think it is about having, you know, people's voices at the table, absolutely, and that's what. You know, being the chair of the Bectu Women's Committee has really been how I've tried to drive this forwards. And the Women's Committee has been part of Bectu for a very long time. The ladies that were part of the original conversations of getting a committee in the first place really had to fight for it. I've been the chair since 2016, and I have stepped into very big shoes to fill. The previous chair of the committee was Christine Bond. She also was one of the first to be a female president of Bectu as well. So very much it always feels like, you know, we're kind of driving change as women within unions, within, you know, that this sort of sector that we're all in as well. So yeah, that was a good start really for me, just to be able to kind of you know, get involved and try and make a difference. And I'm very much someone who, if I see something wrong, I'm quite vocal about it. So I feel like I've been, you know, able to sort of move our committee forwards and be able to link in with other organisations that are doing amazing things. I think one of the big things that, you know, I'm taking away from this session today already is, you know, how can we partner up and help each other, rather than, you know, each of us being in silos and maybe battling our own things on our own. Actually, there are people out there to help. We just sometimes need to, you know, kind of connect each other together and find out who else is doing similar things, you know. We've been doing campaigns for many years as the Women's Equality Committee, and I realised over the past couple of years we probably don't shout about it enough. We just sort of get our heads down and crack on. We've worked around period poverty, and after a TUC women's conference we rephrased that to period dignity. We're forever learning, you know, understanding the terms and the phrases that we use to try and make period dignity more acceptable as a term to talk about. So we kind of used the TUC as the trade union congress council. So they sort of the trade union for all the other trade unions, and so they have a yearly women's conference that some of the Bectu members and prospect members attend. So that's really great to be able to be part of, because actually we get to communicate and engage and listen to other trade union women who are sharing their issues and how they're getting on or not getting on in their working life as well. So you hear some harrowing stories, and some we've already heard in this session already, and it's how do we move forward and how do we try and help each other in that sort of conversation. So we did use the TUC's almost the motions that we would put to conference. We, as Bectu, would always try and have a voice at the table in terms of freelance, self-employed or casual workers, because there were lots of unions that are from the big unions that would talk about employees, and it was very much the smaller people who maybe don't have a stronger voice or don't feel that they can have a voice without it having implications. So we would always very much try and focus the motions that we would put in as Bectu, and then in future as the prospect wider union about freelancers, self-employed and casual workers. So very much trying to make sure that that voice was still heard, even at a more national sort of wider trade union level as well. So we usually put motions to conference every year. We try and focus on that, and then off the back of those, normally around March, the TUC Women's Conference this year was online, so you could take part and just watch it as an observer yourself. And so that gives us an understanding of where our campaign should be going as Bectu's Women's Committee, and how we can kind of help those conversations move forwards. We've also previously done annually or biannually Bectu women members events as well. So we do our own events and try and help our members, and then also understand what the campaigns are that are important to them. So we've covered lots of different things over the years. We also found around 2016-17 that a big thing that our female members were wanting was actually mentoring circles, mentoring within the membership itself. So we kind of took that away. We understood what that would actually mean. There were some great staff members within Bectu, Rachel Bennett and Kate Anthony, that then took that and made that into a bigger thing. It became a pilot scheme. We ran around 2 or 3 different pilot schemes of pairing up mentors and mentees within the Bectu membership. And then now that's being rolled out to the wider union. So actually, we're continuously trying to figure out what is important to our members and how can we deliver that value so that we can support, based on the current times as well. And I think that's really important to think about how do we move forwards from that. So talking about the women's, the Bectu women's events that we did, we've always previously done those face-to-face in person. The last one we did in 2019, which was around November. We didn't realise at the time that was going to be the last face-to-face that we were going to have for a while. But that also became, a kind of a starting block to talk about things like the period dignity campaigns, like the mentoring circles that we also did. And within our events, we also try and do some training as well. So we kind of think about what the topics are and be able to ask and verify this with our members so that we can have a continuous conversation of what people are interested in, and how can we really best utilize our time as well, because the majority of our women's committee members are doing it in their own time on a voluntary basis. So we have to be careful about balancing that out as well as what we're trying to achieve. So we talked the 2019 event about networking as well, and I think something there about women getting together and talking about issues and about things that maybe we can help each other with in terms of campaigning, but also especially from the self-employed casual freelancer side of things, things, networking for business and work as well. And I think as a professional body, I think we can, be really well placed to be able to offer that. So then COVID came around. That was interesting. On a personal basis, I had to take a face-to-face company onto completely online as well. But actually, the online side of things was really interesting because we could learn a lot from that. In the 2019 event that we had, it was face-to-face. We had to limit numbers because of the space that we were using and because of the expenses that we would have to pay of our members to be able to get people, accommodation, travel, all that sort of thing. And actually, the online world enabled us to invite, rather than just maxing out at 30 people for an event, we were able to invite over 100 women to our event in 2020. So November 2020, we covered topics and we kind of thought, well, we did have a plan, but actually we rewrote it because, what was important to people now during COVID. And, the topic of the conversation today, how do we help women during COVID? And this echoes what some of the ladies have already said. But the two things that came out of that was flexible working and also networking, because especially if you're not necessarily bumping into people on sets, or, if you are back to work and your workplace is now open and running again, there's still this physical distance that we have to have. So how do we, engage with people? How do we talk to each other in that more informal environment that we're working on at the moment? So we did the event online. We covered things like imposter syndrome, confidence building. We also thought it was important because a lot of women that we talked to who were members had talked about, actually considering career changes, and that reflects what some of the ladies have said already in terms of feeling that pressure of COVID and thinking, is this the sector I want to be in anymore? So we also offered some CV training and some LinkedIn profile work as well. So we were able to kind of align ourselves with what really our members were really needing at the time. So jumping that on a bit, 2021, we've got another event coming up soon, focused on flexible working. We're going to have not pregnant men, screw that you, sorry. There's so many awesome organisations. We're going to have an event on the 7th of April that's going to have Share My Telejob, Prime Time, Parents in Performing Arts. There's too many P's in there. And also the Bectu Visions Take Two initiative as well. So 7th April, 10 till 11. So that's something that members can join straight away and get involved on that. So yeah, information's going to hopefully pop in the chat for that as well. So I thought just to wrap up a couple of pointers around how can people get more involved. The Women's Equality Committee is very organised and structured committee itself. We have two representatives from each of the Bectu divisions on it, and you do have to get elected through the official divisional processes for that. All the seats are full at the moment. There's lots of other ways to get involved. The big thing is, if you are a member, go and seek out our Bectu Women's group Facebook page. If you just type that onto Facebook, that's where we share campaigns and information and useful documents like the TUC has got a great workbook on menopause at work. So if you haven't already had a look at that, check that out. Get involved in your branch if you're a member. That's the way that I started. I started talking to people in my branch and find out who your equality rep is. If there isn't one, become it. That's the kind of just way to get active. And don't be scared to actually voice your opinion, because there are supportive people in your branch that do want to know. It's just maybe they've not thought about it in that way before. And then attend our events, get involved, build conversations, meet other people. That's something that I'm going to definitely try and bring forwards with the Women's Committee this year, is try and do some more online networking, because we've seen the need now where women are actually just wanting to, might be in solidarity, just saying, yeah, I'm in the same boat, but there also might be ways that we can help each other as well. And for those who aren't in Bectu, well, you don't get any of that. So I would highly recommend joining Bectu and becoming a member so that you can have access to all of that support and all the other stuff that goes with being a member of Bectu.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you. And I absolutely agree with you that although, you know, the past year has been really difficult, I think what we have learned, one of the things we've learned is that, you know, online events really actually can be a great leveler and give people who perhaps wouldn't have the opportunity to, you know, travel to London for a meeting or a training course or whatever, can give people the opportunity to get involved. And on that note, somebody's asked in the Q&A, how do they get involved in your organisations? I think Liz has covered that from a Bectu perspective very well. But what about excluded and pregnant and screwed? Who wants to go first? Sonali.
So we have a private Facebook group, which is at the minute there's around 30,000 members in there. You can just search for Excluded UK and you'll find us. We've also got a public page as well. But the group is really the kind of foundation of the organisation. It's where conversations take place constantly. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of posts in there pretty much every day, but there are key conversations there that are ways in which we can support each other. And I think support is fundamental to what we do. And I think that's also come out in the broader conversations that we've had on this panel, how important support really is. So you can get involved through the Facebook group. We're also very active on Twitter. But if you want to get more involved, get in touch with us. Tell us what you can do, what you can bring to us as an organisation, because we're all volunteers. There are volunteers who come and go, because obviously we're all in this sort of state of flux at the moment, because people's circumstances are going to be evolving and changing. So we're always keen for people to come forward and tell us what you can bring to us, because yeah, we're doing multiple things on many different levels. And so go to our website, find our contact details and get in touch. Thanks,
Sonali. Olga?
Yeah, so Pregnant and Screwed, I think the website link is in the chat there. You can follow us on social media. That's probably the best place to sort of keep up to date with what's happening. But again, we're mostly volunteer run. So there's a form on the website as well, where you can say what skills you've got and how you might be able to help us. And of course, as a charity, if you feel like donating some money as well, that's always helpful.
Thanks, Olga. Somebody has mentioned in the chat, and this is certainly something I'm very, not in the chat, in the Q&A, it's something I'm very conscious of, about working in theatre if you're a parent, and particularly if you're a sole parent, how difficult that is. And yeah, Ros has also mentioned about parents and carers in performing arts who are doing huge amounts of work to try to make working in performing arts easier, but undoubtedly it is a challenge, and it is certainly a part of the industry that still needs, I think, some quite radical looking at in terms of being able to work flexibly and long hours and all those sorts of things. I don't know if any of you want to add anything to that point.
Yeah, so we work with parents in performing arts as well. We know those guys really well. I know that in non-COVID times they have had West End creches and things, particularly for auditions, and they're also big advocates of role shares as well.
Thank you. I mean, there are so many great organisations, as I said earlier, working across the industries to try to make working life easier for parents and carers. As I said earlier, organisations like Telly Mums and Share My Telly Job, Parents and Carers in Performing Arts, organisations like Raising Films, that I think there is a real appetite out there to, post-pandemic, actually make sure that work works for parents and carers as well as, for organisations and so on. So I think it's a real, it's something that we definitely need to collaborate on more going forward. And I mean, surely this is the theme for today, and the thing we should all take away. I think women on the whole naturally work in a very collaborative way. They seek out ways in which they can support each other and ways in which we can move agendas forward on a positive basis. And somebody's mentioned in the chat about, of course, how we all feel as women about our personal safety, you know, whether that's when we're going out in the evening or actually when we're wandering around during the day. And, you know, when we take those decisions about, shall I go down that lane because it's a shortcut or shall I not? And I think following on from the idea about collaboration that is surely the message, that as women, we both have to support each other when we see something which is wrong in the workplace, but also talk to our friends, our colleagues, our children, our husbands and partners or whatever, about just how women feel, the constraints we put on ourselves just because we don't, you know, we're used from a very early age not to feel safe when walking about. And I think if we can also take that into the workplace and start calling people out if they choose, for example, to comment on what a colleague happens to be wearing when they're in a studio, then I think the world would be a much better place, and we would all feel much happier about ourselves and our working environments, but also our living environments, because that is so important. You know, women's voices, women leaders, making sure that all of our organisations are reflective of our membership and so on, is, I think, really, really important to me, and is the most important thing to me, I think, probably. But don't tell anyone that. No, please do tell everyone that. Have we got any more questions? Sarah's saying, so excited this conversation is happening. I work in theatre and it's still a challenge to be a woman in this industry. I am so proud to be a rep for Bectu, but how can we get more women to build the confidence to become reps? Liz?
Yeah, I think, you know, it is the confidence thing, I think, to start off with. And I think it's the start of our last event that we ran on behalf of the Women's Equality Committee. We actually did a bit of an introduction to the structure of Bectu, because I think that's still a bit of a barrier to start off with. Like, who do I talk to? Where do I get started with? I think I'd suggest to that is just buddy up with someone, because the thing is, you don't necessarily have to do reps training or anything straight away. You can just start to maybe go to a branch meeting if they're running. I know a lot at the moment, there's a lot of branches that are conducting their business virtually, so it might be a bit more flexible for people to attend. Just ask, like, I'm interested in getting involved. I don't know, like, the rules or the regulations yet. And, you know, there are some Bectu members that have been in the membership a while, and will be able to tell you, you know, oh, you need to talk to that person, or, you know, link you up. It is about those conversations. It is about just having that first go of going to something. I know I was really lucky at my national official at the time in my local area in the Northwest kind of said, oh, well, just come to a meeting. And she said, you know, actually, if you want to meet for a coffee beforehand, let's have a coffee and I'll explain to you, like, how the meeting is, like what the things happen in it. And I think that can break down a lot of barriers for people. And then actually, you know, buddy up and say, is there anyone I can go with? We did that. I used to be part of the Young Members Committee before I expired. And that was a big thing we did all the time, you know, making sure that if someone's a young member and they want to come in, but they don't really know anyone, well, you know, let's try and have a chat beforehand, explain to you what the meeting might be about. And I think that could be a really good first step, if you can just kind of say, hey, I'm interested. And if you don't know anyone in your branch at all, and you do want to get involved, you know, just contact Bectu, you know, the head office or the membership, and say, you know, can you put me in touch with whoever runs my branch? And, you know, most of the time, everyone will be really welcoming. Just say, I'm new, or I've never been to something before. Can you help me get involved? And you know what? If someone says, I want to get involved, I will jump on that, because I'm like, yes, we need more people. Come and help us. And here's what needs doing. So if you just kind of voice your interest in getting involved to, you know, kind of your branch to start off with, that could be a great way to get started.
Absolutely, I agree. The more women that get involved in Bectu, the better. The more variety of voices will be heard, and the more the more we will represent our members. And it is incredibly important, I think, for trade unions to really look at themselves as well. I mean, let's cards on the table. Over the years, the trade unions have not been the greatest organisations in terms of women's representation, and we really need to turn that about, I think, because it is fundamentally important that women make up half of the workforce, and so we need to make sure that the issues that really matter to us are listened to as well, and it's not just all about pay and whatever. So although I'm not saying pay isn't important, but issues around work-life balance and what happens when people go off on maternity and parental leave, all of those issues are probably as important to us. So I think we've come to the end of our questions, but also the end of our time. And can I just say, and no bull with this at all, this has been the most inspiring conversation that I've had this week, and I'm really pleased that this has come today. I think we all needed it. So thank you, Sonali, thank you, Olga, and thank you very much, Liz. Thank you. Thanks to all of you who joined us as well, and please do get involved, whether it's getting involved in Bectu or Excluded UK or Pregnant Then Screwed. Bring your activism, because your voice is really important, and as I say, the more women, the better. Thank you.
Thank you.